Ukrainian Institute of Modern Art. In her two-person show at Ukrainian Institute, Judy shared a love for keeping the arts alive. She has brought visual arts to Suzuki festivals, jazz festivals, and arts retreats for high school students, helping them integrate their passion for visual arts into their lives. Judy earned a BFA with a merit-based scholarship award from Washington University in St. Louis, and while working at Landfall Press, she earned a graduate degree in printmaking from the Illinois Institute of Chicago. Welcome, Judy. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much. So thank you so much to the board and to Lorraine for your patience.
No worries.
So I think we'll try and connect here, okay? Does that sound
Okay. Yep.
okay?
Fabulous.
How are we doing?
Good. We can
Oh,
see.
there you are.
Good.
Oh,
Okay.
we should have everyone mute except for Lorraine and
Oops.
Judith.
Oh, excuse me, Judy, just one moment. I forgot to mention, we are holding all of our questions until the end. And you can put them in the chat during the presentation. I will read them aloud at the end of the talk. So just keep that in mind, okay, everybody? Thank you. Go ahead.
And mute yourselves except for
Me.
Judith.
Okay. Well, this is really delightful. I thought I would start with a show I had a couple of years ago at the Ukrainian Museum. And this way you could see all of my work at once, and you could see the three-dimensional stuff and the two-dimensional work and the energy that comes together. So it all comes from the same place. As we move on, and it's not letting me. This is what I ran into. There. So as we move on, this is a piece that the Ukrainian was looking for artists who were working in Chicago in the 1970s. And they chose this piece that I did when I was 24 years old and married for 2 years. This shot of me with it is clearly not from 24 years ago, when I was 24. And when they put it up and it was installed, it was a gift, I think. It made me realize that what I was doing when I was 24 is really no different than what I'm doing now. And it made me realize that we all have this essence inside of us that we carry with us as we journey. And we hit rough times, and there's some glittery, beautiful moments. There's some times where they're just split-second moments in our life that we carry with us, and that maybe changes the path a little bit, but our essence stays inside of us, safe. And I think it grounds us and keeps us going. And I think as artists, we're fortunate to be able to have this so that we can always keep it alive and have a place for it to get out. So this piece is another textile piece, and you'll see why I started with textiles. It's called Coverings, and it came from the thinking that we really embrace coverings from the time we're born, even as we're infants and as toddlers, we carry them around, and they comfort us all the way through life. So this covering is filled with glittery, I think you can see in the detail, there's a lot of beads in it, glittery moments and joyous times, along with darker times, things that are difficult. But all of it is something that we carry with us. I realized at one point that my father's girdle factory, they had a photo of their company taken in 1923. And I looked at this photo and realized that textiles must be in my blood. And when you look at this, it almost looks as if I'm made out of it, which sometimes I wonder. So my father used to bring home sewing machines all the time, and ones that they didn't need anymore. So my brothers and I learned to use them at a very early age. And then there would be times when my brothers and my cousins all worked together at the factory in the summertime. And then there was this also a major thing in our family where everyone had to know how to sew a button on properly that would last a lifetime. So that was big in our house. And then I remember going to fabric stores with my mom and feeling the fabrics and um, learning the names of them. The warmest memory I have is embroidering a tablecloth with my grandmother and my mother. And I can still remember hours of just quietly, it was so peaceful. And I think that that thread that we used long back then, I carried with me. And so this work that was done in 2013, I think it's the same thread. And that when we use textiles and stitching, that it's carrying this thread with us, and the stitches kind of describe where we're at now and bring a thread on to the future. This is another way of using stitching. I can't imagine that my grandmother would have thought of this. So these are organisms coming out of the wall, and they're obviously oozing and changing. There isn't a lot of glorious, joyful moments, I don't think, in this installation. There's a few parts here that are lighter, and the colors are lighter. But for the most part, it seems pretty dark. There's some drawing in it too, and it's morphing out of the walls. So the idea that these organisms are getting any nurturing is pretty bleak from a wall, whatever. So moving on, these two are details of an 11-foot drawing that I've been working on currently for a year and a half. And I put them up so that you can see where all of this comes from. So clearly we'll talk about how the embroidering got into the drawing in a few minutes. The drawing comes back from when I was a little girl and I used to sit in my room at home by myself with a stack of paper and crayons for hours. I had two brothers that never wanted to play with me, which could have had something to do with it, but it was wonderful memories. I remember one day I was bored and my mother told me to go out and draw our house if I had nothing to do. So I started drawing this house, and I remember drawing every single brick in the house. And as I looked back on it, clearly I didn't draw every single brick, but I felt like it did, which is all that really matters when we're working. But when you look at these drawings and you see the detail in them, that reminds me again that the essence of who we are doesn't change. I mean, when I was a tiny little girl, why did I want to draw every single brick? I could have just drawn the house. And that sort of feels the same way with these. The organism and the natural part of it, I think, comes a lot from a passion my dad had for horticulture. And we took many walks in his garden. One day we pretended we were bees and took the stamen from one daylily and rubbed it on the pistil of another. So we were doing the work of bees. And then he would take pear branches and graft them onto apple trees. And when I think of it now, it's almost like all of us taking different media and trying to blend them together. It all feels the same to me. He would put fruit pits in the refrigerator all winter. And then in the spring, they'd be planted. They'd turn into peach trees and many kinds of plum trees. So we had every kind of fruit imaginable And then when they were harvested, my grandmothers and my mother and all of us would cook and bake and freeze them for holidays. So our whole lives revolved around the cycles of life and the seasons. And it was a wonderful way to grow up, learning what people's passions were. And I think that the people closest to me had big passions. One, my grandmother was a musician. My mother loved teaching and books and opened a children's bookstore. My father moved on to raise orchids and bonsai when his body gave out and couldn't do gardening. So I think that these passions come with us. They're part of our essence, and they kick in sometimes when we don't even realize it. So this big drawing that you'll see more of later, there was a time when this embroidery and this cloth just needed to kick in. This is silk um, fabric here and gold embroidery thread. And there's some very glittery acetate back there. I'm not real picky whether it's silk or acetate. But these are glittery moments inside life that get hidden, that we carry with us. And that's a gift. So here we are, moving on with these passions. Mine was in music. I made music with piano and violin, and I loved to dance, but it got to applying to college. And I needed to decide what I was going to do. So I decided that I needed to draw every day, but it didn't matter if I didn't have music all the time, if I wasn't making music constantly. So here I am. And this was around the time when I went to my first object drawing class. And the professor asked us the first problem was to draw an object by drawing the space around it. It didn't have anything to do with the object. It had to do with the space around it. And so I was in this room by myself. This happened right before these drawings happened. And there was a typewriter there, and I decided, all right, that's what I'll draw. I'll draw the typewriter. And as I was drawing, the keys in the typewriter came alive. And it was very scary to me. They kind of had personalities of their own, and the way they moved was very unique to each other. And I sort of stopped and thought, oh my gosh, what's wrong with my head? Am I living in two different worlds? And I was young. I was a freshman in college. I had no idea if that was okay or not, but I didn't have much choice. So I moved on to other machines besides typewriters. These are clutch plates. And I kept going to places and picking up old machinery. And then when I drew it, it turned into these organisms. And I think you can see in the left one, the dots on these, whatever they are all different on each one. And I think it's because each part of this organism moves in a different way and has its own characteristics and personalities. So this came a little later on, and it was the first time where I questioned the rectangle. It really was getting in the way for me. So I added strips of paper on the top. And the rest of it was done with pretty brisk, thick brushes, mostly acrylic paint. And these slashes here were all lined up and then clearly fell out of order. So it was kind of like chaos and order. If you move to the right, this gets even more chaotic, and dark over here in the middle. But then there's these places here where the drawing is very calm, and you wonder, well, are these two different worlds? Is that what's always inside of me that I'm always thinking about? And then there's also rainbows over here, where there's always seems to be a place, if you try hard, you can find hidden joy. There's two drawings here that I'm going to show you. They're from Another Place series, and it's where the process did mimic life. And I felt like I was totally into the paper and into the drawing. These are about 5 foot tall. And there's some crackle paint here. And I would sand into the crackle paint. There's also Gorilla Glue and some plaster joint compound. And when I sanded it into it, I would find these organisms. So I didn't know what I was doing before I started. And then I was totally freed up to do whatever came out. I just wanted to know what would come out of me. And this is what came out. So there's a huge difference in these organisms and the way they move and the way they feel. I think the dots and the lines over here on the left say something about this space, and they kind of dictate what the paper is doing or the shape of the paper. Here's where I sanded through joint compound and ended up with Gorilla Glue under there. So it was always like sanding down and seeing what came before and what's happening now and what might happen in the future. So this image right here is kind of raw and excruciating. It was plaster that was sanded down to see the Gorilla Glue. And the difference between what's happening here and what's happening in the drawing up here, they're two very different rhythms and different feelings. So we move on to another one in the same series. When I look at this, I feel that wide expanse of feeling when you start a drawing that all you want to do is feel what's there and to open up and have the media come with you and open up with you. So these I don't know if I can't see what's on the bottom here, what you're seeing. So these pink shapes here on the lower right, lower left, they start all lined up together. There's something about the atmosphere in this drawing or where they're at, where they fall apart, and they fall apart at the edge of the paper. So again, I'm wondering, well, why do drawings stop at the edge of the paper? And that's where these pink things are going. If you look at the details, the top right, it's pretty harsh. There's a lot of fiber there that's fallen apart and coming out of whatever is growing in here. But then on the bottom, there's different kinds of feelings. This one that has very sheer kind of polyester material here is cut and sewn with really tiny stitches. And it feels light and airy along with these other marks. There's some over here that are just kind of fleeing or flighting or light as opposed to darker ones. So that's a lot about what happens to my drawings, and I think that's part of what happens in our journey. So this one is called Down the Middle because there's a huge crack down the middle. And, who knows what's coming out of this or where it's been or where it's going. Here you can see some textile oozing out of the plaster. And here there's drawing that somehow manages to weave into the plaster. So it's about all of us use different kinds of materials and somehow get them to morph together. The Gorilla Glue that I'm using here is just delicious when it morphs. It dries and effervesces and does wonderful things. The bottom here, we can't tell what happened, if it's got something the matter with it and it's decaying, or if it's just the nature of how this particular organism grows. But you wonder what's going to happen in the future and what happened that made it be that way. This one is in a series called Life Cycles. When I started this, I had no idea that this was going to be red and look so deep, but it is where the drawing started. So it started with Gorilla Glue and some plaster, and I sanded into it. Sanding, there's something about sanding that I love. I think it's always digging for hidden things, that always amazes me. So out of this came all these other organisms, and they just happened. This isn't something that planned. This is something that I felt just grew out of here. So these are a little more easier to deal with than whatever was happening in this deep hole, but it gets even easier as it comes out. And these are lighter, wispier kind of organisms. And up here, they're almost fluffy and going off indefinitely. On the edge again, I'm noticing now that it's always the left edge for some reason. but there's more Gorilla Glue here. And when I was using it, I would take a sheet of paper and a bottle of Gorilla Glue and then draw all over the paper just haphazardly, kind of scribble with the Gorilla Glue. And as it dried, it morphed and grew. Then I would peel it off the paper and cut it up and use it as if I had drawn with it. So this is a similar kind of process. And I think the edge was still on my mind. I couldn't figure out what to do with the edge because here I was working with organisms that would move and morph and duplicate themselves indefinitely. But here's the edge of the paper. So in this one, I think the edge of the paper kind of defined a shape here that all these organisms are living in. So it began with a thick brush full of acrylic paint. That's what this mauve color is. And I kind of threw it on the piece of paper. I usually work standing up, so the paper is pinned onto drywall. And these happen to grow out of whatever these were. And then there's some crackle paint down here that I sanded into. And this is what came out of it. So it's always looking for what's already there. I didn't know these existed until I started looking for them. There's petal kind of things up here and growing on the side of whatever this, I know these look bud-like to me, but they're all organized here and kind of peaceful and restful. And up here, not at all. It's almost like there's a huge wind blowing them out of the way. So again, there's lots of different things happening, different kinds of memories, different kinds of ways of moving and thinking. So this one always makes me smile. Before we talked about on a journey, it's our journeys as we live life with this essence inside of us. We collect different memories and experiences, some glittery and beautiful, some very, very difficult and dark. But they're also split-second memories, and it's amazing how much they color our lives. So this happened to be about a fuzzball that my oldest daughter, who's now 50, found when she was in the bathtub one day when she was around 4. And she loved this fuzzball and put it in a little plastic. I found a little plastic box for her. And I think it amazes me more than her, but I've never forgotten it. And I think it sort of was the impetus for this drawing. This is crackle paint and a little bit of joint compound that I sanded into. This is clearly the fuzzball. And then there's other marks that are very, very different than what happened here. So when I sanded into to this joint compound and crackle paint, all new organisms opened up that I was able to draw into and bring out. And what's connecting them is a whole different thing that usually shows up in a lot of my drawings. I'm not sure where they come from, but they're softer and slower growing and slower morphing than these organisms here. So these are clearly fast and there's nothing soft about them. This is gold leaf, and it brings some excitement to the way they're moving. What they are, I don't know. They just come. So this is another one that's about looking into the paper and finding what's in it and making sense out of it, which is kind of what we do when we go through life. Sometimes we have to step back and see what's actually happening and see if we can make some sense out of it. So as far as the process goes, this started with this dark acrylic brush painting with great big brush, big strokes, just unabashedly getting it onto the paper. And then when it dried, I sanded into it, and this is what I ended up with. And so all of this is coming out of this hidden space here. A lot of hidden stuff in what I do. And it's coming out. I think there's a detail on the next page. So you can see down here that the joint compound was put over fiberfill, which probably came from my father's girdle factory, and Gorilla Glue. And as I put it on, I mean, obviously, if it's a joint compound on a soft surface, it's just going to crack. But I was up for that because then I always wondered what was in between the cracks. And here's some, I don't know if they're net kind of things, but they're all coming out from underneath the plaster. Over here, these same, I don't know, I don't know what we can call them, but they keep reappearing. And they're actually pretty soft. It's coming from a soft place. This is textile that's glued on here in such a way that you can't really see that it's glued. It's a very fine glue that you can put on with a toothpick, so you barely see what's happening to it. So this one is a favorite series of mine. A very close friend of mine from college sent me her knee MRI because she thought I was the only one that would appreciate it. And I loved it. So out of this knee MRI came this series of drawings called Metamorphosis. And out of what I guess is the knee are all of these organisms. They all have a different way of moving. They have a different look about them. I think each organism was put on with maybe some spackle paint or um, crackle paint. This one's moving more. And my zoom is in the way. Can you all see what's on the bottom here? So there's two images at the bottom, and who knows who those guys are. I mean, the other ones are all moving and had their way of moving and their way of going through life cycles. And then these at the bottom are just sort of hanging out. And I don't know if they're tired or if it's the end of their cycle or the beginning, but I love looking at the differences between them. This one happened right around the time when I visited Yellowstone National Park for the first time. And I was standing at the boiling pools and realized, I don't know why, for the first time, that I felt like we had all just crawled out of these pools. And that I realized that all living things on Earth have the same DNA, and we all kind of came from some of the same place, I guess. So it kind of blew my mind. And I realized that when I was in college, thinking that I lived in two worlds, my inside essence and the outside world, that it's bigger than that. That there's also an outside world who has a whole that has a whole hidden space deep inside of it. So life started getting very complicated for me because I was thinking about all these hidden spaces and how they related to each other and whether I could bring them together. So these are details from that drawing, and this is silk paper that I grew to love, and I um, used an adhesive to glue it on to the original Arch paper that I use, and then just rubbed it. And I guess maybe deep down I'm thinking if I just rubbed it, I'd understand it better or I'd feel it more. But a lot of what I do has to do physically sanding into the paper and rubbing it. The one next to it is a detail of a zipper that I somehow managed to get to morph into these, whatever these are that I keep drawing. So clearly the zipper came from some part of my journey, and it kind of kicked in that day as I was working on this. And I think it's obvious that when you open a zipper, there's something deeper inside. So I think I was curious about that. If you stick it into a drawing, do you think about what's underneath when you open it up? And and then something like this happened where there's an abundance of riches as far as media goes. And it was exciting to get it to all morph together. So while everything's growing and morphing and changing, it's all learning to do it together. It's not a very uplifting piece to look at. I mean, it doesn't look like there's a lot of joy in this morphing and growing in these life cycles, but it's interesting to look at the differences in how they present themselves. This is one room. This is a corner of a room. So this piece was site specific, and sometimes these organisms would morph onto a wall next to it. You can see there's still a lot of sanding here. This was Gorilla Glue that morphed and ended up getting painted white. So this is a drawing that happened after I was told to go find a myofascial release therapist. And it amazed me that they dig into your muscles deeply, and then everything opens up and feels better. So this drawing on the side it's the beginning of this drawing. So it was a process shot that I did when I was beginning this. So you can see how it all happens. My trusty palm sander is at the bottom here that I can't live without. And that's how this is when I was talking about digging into the paper, this is what happens. So there's dark places here that open up. The opening up parts always seem to have textiles in them. They get more sheer, and the bottom part, however, is more joint compound. So I think there's some details here. So the detail, the top and the middle is a detail. You can see my cursor, right? It's a detail of what's over here. So this spot right here is the same as what's going on here. You can see how that happens. The bottom part, the bottom detail in the middle is Gorilla Glue that I found that was clear, that was a relief. And then I started drawing around it so I could get to the point where these images, these things that keep coming in my work, they morphed out of the Gorilla Glue. So over here, you can't really tell which is the Gorilla Glue and which is the drawing. And I think this whole idea of morphing and trying to make things blend with each other and weave together is fascinating to me. This is a studio shot. It's not the way I work on these drawings, but at the time I must have needed something of the two of them in one place. But I keep these carts around so that I can just grab whatever media I need to make it feel like I want it to feel. This is one that's in the same series, comes from the same place. Clearly, we gave up with the rectangle. I couldn't make it work anymore, and I felt like it was inhibiting me. I didn't understand it at all. So this way, I didn't need to deal with it anymore. However, there's a straight edge right here. I don't know where that came from. These are details from that one, and you can see that as these open up, there's a lot of adhesive used to use paper and fabric and drawing, it all opens up in different ways. And this is a detail of the plaster with drawing coming out of the plaster. I think there's some fiber fill under there. This one, of course, is in the same series. I couldn't leave it out because when I was working on it, I felt like I had walked inside of it. And I still have that feeling when I look at this. I feel like I'm inside the drawing. Over here on the left, there's some, I guess, collage. There's paper I think it was probably wet and got crinkled, and I made it. So part of what you're seeing is drawn, and part of it is the paper being a separate piece of paper. But it's hard to tell what's drawn and what really is an extra piece of paper. And I love that. It's kind of deceiving and fun to figure out. And I think that's more about what life is about. You know, we have to make things mesh together and weave together, even if they're different. This is a drawing of a rose, a Sharon blossom that's wilted. And this was the beginning of it. So all of these pieces of paper are in this drawing, and there was a lot of use of, I started using a Liquitex flexible gel, and it was nice because you could sand it. So I could use it to mask the differences in the paper and also sand them down. And you can do it a number of times till it's smooth. then here, this drawing, the wilted petal is kind of disappearing into this kind of decayed part of the drawing, but it's also emerging into rebirth and growing and moving on. You can see that in this detail. This is crackle paint here. And so it makes you wonder, is it old and cracking? Is it new and that's the way it is? Or what is the characteristics of whatever these organisms are? But the fact that the petals is decaying into here at the same time that things are rebuilding feels really good to me. When I drew this petal, I didn't mean it to be anything like a nature drawing. It had to do more with me being an ant and crawling over the petal so my pencil, the graphite, was just kind of finding its way and describing it as it grew around it, kind of like this object drawing teacher who was having us draw the outside of things. This is kind of just like feeling your way around an object. And this was another way to see the process. I'm very into pins. I can't get enough of them. I looked up and they've been with us for centuries. They weren't manufactured until the 1700s, but it amazes me. So this was put together with PVS acid-free adhesive and pins. So these drawings, this series started during when we were sheltering inside during COVID. I was feeling this hidden virus, this novel virus that nobody knew anything about, and I was feeling it keenly since hidden things blow me away from the time I was in college. So as I was drawing this, I was looking in a digital microscope and I liked looking in microbiology books. My husband, when he was in medical school, I did that a lot, and I still do it. And I look in them, and then I close it and draw. And because these were all organic and hidden somewhere, I wanted to get into the paper more. And this paper was sanded outside on cement, hence there's lots of little holes. But I couldn't get into the paper because it's just pristine paper. This is Arche, and it wasn't doing what I wanted it to do, and it felt I couldn't get into it deeply enough. I tried sanding through it so it would at least feel like it was pulling apart, but it didn't do it for me. So I ended up leaving the paper outside for a month, and that did the trick. It was just awesome. So when I brought it in, I was trying to look for hidden growing things, and I felt like it was right there in the paper. So when I brought it inside, all I had to do was just look in these parts of the paper, and that's what I found. And it was like a whole nother world. It put me in a place I really hadn't been before because I had tried to get into the paper, but nothing like this. And so at the same time, when all of us are home being worried about this novel virus that nobody understood, this is the way I dealt with it. I was thinking, well, what is in here and where did this virus come from and what's it doing and where's it going to go? Which is what we were all thinking at the time, I think, being afraid. So then I left, well, this time when I left the paper out, I was doing it continually. And this happened to be out during a storm that happened on May 24th, 2020. So it became kind of a diary of climate change. So we're home dealing with this fear of this virus. And at the same time, I'm bringing this paper in from outside that's a diary of what's happening with climate change. So it didn't put me in a great place. This is the paper when it first came in, this image on the right. And you can see what happened to different parts of it. This is a detail of it. You can see parts of it are torn, parts of it are drawn, but they look like they're torn. And that's part of not understanding what's happening. Like, is it really torn or is it not torn? Is this virus going to get under control? What is happening with climate change? I mean, this is climate change that had to do with the cycles of life that kept me grounded my whole life. So I got to the point where um, it became pretty unbearable. So all this awe the awe and wonder that I kind of experienced at Yellowstone kind of turned into angst and fear. And we have 3 members in our family that research climate change from different points of view. And I talked to all of them, and I clearly knew I would never understand the science of this. But I thought that by doing it, it was a way for artists to maybe be a springboard to science, to show the gravity of what was happening. So the more I worked on this, the more I realized that these seasons that I loved, I mean, who knows what's going to happen to them, and where would our stability come from if we didn't know spring was coming? So if this was painful. It wasn't an easy drawing to do. When I look at it, I'm sort of amazed that I put all this detail in it. But hey, this is the little girl that drew all the bricks. So um, it's interesting to watch. And then everything opened up and everybody said, okay, forget about it now. Just move on. We don't need to worry about it anymore. Just forget about it. And that's not the way I roll, of course. So I thought that we needed to take it with us. The the tiny parts that we were all inside. There were some parts that were beautiful that we found out that we wouldn't, silver linings that we wouldn't have found out about before, in spite of the the angst and the disease and what was going on. But this was about taking it with us and opening up into tomorrow. Hence, it's called Embracing Yesterday. So this is huge. It's 7 feet tall and it's 9 feet wide. So when you stand here, it feels good because it feels like you're part of the opening up and part of the beautiful part. This is a process drawing of it. These are, you can see more closely where some of these holes are real holes and some of them are drawn because I needed to draw them to look like holes, which is the same process. Over here in the drawing is the parts about it that weren't so beautiful. I mean, here's a red slit here, but there's other beautiful parts. So here we are. This is the drawing that those 2 details came from the beginning of when I was talking, when the embroidery invaded those graphite drawings. So I started this about 1.5 years ago, at a time when I was realizing, I hope some of you can relate to this, that as we get older, the physical part of us takes a lot of time. It begins to play a huge part in our life. And so there's this problem of making sure that our essence stays alive in spite of it. So by working on this drawing, I mean, I was right when I picked my major because the drawing kept that essence alive for me at times when it wasn't so easy. So here there's glittery, beautiful parts, there's deep, difficult parts. This is all embroidery added on here, some embroidery that's not finished down there. This is finger painting that I learned from my youngest of 7 grandchildren. She's 4. And she taught me that when you finger paint, you make your arms go together and you close your eyes and you feel what's going on inside. And it was invaluable. She found her essence very young, I think. So there's this line on top that I hope you can see. Oops, wait a second. This line on top is a compass. So every time I've shown this drawing in process, I've needed to know what's okay, what's grounding it. And so this line at the top always tells me that I'm right and that the drawing is steady and that it moves out from there. And as it goes out to the edges, who knows what's happening next? These are these two drawings that I showed you before. This is another detail. There's a lot of use of iridescent powder that I rub into Sennelier clear oil pastel. I love it because you can rub into it. And this makes me realize that, especially as collage artists, we're used to bringing different things together and making them work together. And I realized more and more how much it means to me when I'm working and how much I love doing that and how much together we can hope for a future when all these living things on Earth that I've found out so much about over the years, that maybe we can all find differences together and find a way to all live on this planet peacefully. And this is materials that I thought you might be, it's just a list that I thought you might be interested in. This is pieces of paper that were sanded on cement. So now, any questions?
Thank you so much, Judy. Yeah, there were lots of questions. I'll start from the top. And a couple people had this question. What is the actual process for ongoing process drawing?
The process is that if it needs to move somewhere, I just find something to attach to it and move it somewhere, which I think is the only reason I belong in your group, because that's collage, right? I'm attaching it to another piece of paper.
But how do you start? What's
like-
the first thing that you do? You have the paper.
I put a piece of paper on the wall. So the walls in my studio have wall board on all of them. So I can attach any piece of paper anytime with pins, of which you can imagine I have many, all different kinds of pins. And then often I start, it'll be a rectangle, but I can't handle looking at a rectangle. So often the minute I start working on it, I tear the paper and then move the pins so it'll stay on there still.
And then how do you start with a base coat on the paper or just?
No, well, should I go back to some of these drawings? Would that help? Or do you want me to leave it here? Whatever. Some of the drawings you could see that there was black on the edges. So I often take a huge brush with a lot of thick acrylic paint on it and smear it all over the paper. Not in any specific way, just to get it all over the paper. And then I let it dry. And then when I use a pound sander and sand into it, all of these images that you see just come out of it. They're all there.
So you keep adding and sewing into it and.
Well, some of them are, this particular one which one are we talking about? Wait a second. Do you mean this one? This is just constantly adding on to it.
Okay.
So it started in the middle. I think these were small. Do you remember those drawings during COVID that were very small and detailed and looked kind of like this? Well, this is what they felt caught to me, because things don't just stay like that. I mean, even viruses grow, unfortunately. So it needed to grow. So it grew.
So the textures in this one are made by layers of paint and drawing?
There isn't a lot of paint in it. It's mostly, there's some that flexible, where is it? It was on that list, this flexible bonding gel. I use a lot of, because it's an easy way to get two pieces of paper to come together without seeing.
Well, versus the ones in the early part of your showing, where you had sewn beads and sewing into it. And those were still highly textured. It's hard for me to imagine how you could sew into that.
The sewing was mostly done before it was put onto anything
see.
dirty.
Ah,
Actually, I had that problem here. This piece right here is a piece of embroidered silk fabric.
oh,
Over here and over here, there's some fabric under here. And then this is a whole piece of silk here. And
Mm.
it's not, I found out that it doesn't feel real good to embroider when you can't really feel the fabric and move it around. It's very difficult to embroider once it's glued onto a piece of paper.
I see. So on the early ones, where you had so much beading in there, did you do each one individually to put on that?
I did,
Oh
yes.
my gosh. That's a lot of work, but beautiful.
Yeah, it doesn't feel like it. It feels like just living life. It's kind of the way it's like drawing, only you're drawing with beads.
Mhm.
I like your metaphors for
Thank
every,
you.
Yes,
almost all
yes.
of your processes have a metaphor
But
attached.
every section that you showed us, each one is so beautiful. It each one has its own story, like you were saying, and they're very pleasing and beautiful to see.
Well, thanks.
Absolutely.
Thanks for listening hard enough to understand what I was trying to talk about.
We have lots of questions here. Let's get to some more. Jean, does that answer your question? Jean had a question about the ongoing drawing. Does that answer that question specifically? I think it does.
Yes, I do. I'm starting to get what you're doing. I think I thought of it as something that because of the compound, the joint compound, that it would not be flexible. And therefore, every time you moved it or added to it, it would kind of start to be brittle and break and crack and all those things. But it sounds like you put a flexible coating on it to keep it able to be moved around as you're adding on to it. Am I
Right.
understanding?
So around that drawing with the Rose of Sharon blossom, when I got to that, I stopped using joint compound because all of the drawings previous to that, I had to have crates made every time I needed to get it
Yeah,
anywhere. And
yeah,
and they're heavy. And not only that, I would write all of these installation instructions, and I love putting them up by hammering a hole in them in the drawing. And so the installation instructions had to be very detailed, and they all stand away from the wall. They have gator board behind them. So it was in a show in Chicago, and I always give them my phone number because it's tricky and I feel badly that it's such a disaster to install. And the installing people called me and said, "This drawing is beautiful, but we're not equipped to put a nail into your drawing. We really don't feel we can do that." So I had to go install this drawing. So now I give them permission and I put embroidery floss through the holes where the nails need to go so they don't have to feel like they're messing up my drawing.
Is
just
that
the
how,
case.
is that how you hang them with nails?
With nails, yeah, in strategic spots. So some of these dark spots are hard parts of life, right? So if you're hammering a nail in them, that feels good, right? That's so
Okay, I have one more question because I've tried to do things like this over my long history, and I've had some technical issues with things like, see your top in this image tends to as the temperature and the humidity changes, they tend to bend over. It doesn't stay flat against the surface the way yours does. So it seemed to me, or the gallery wouldn't allow anything that didn't have a hanging mechanism on the back.
well, there are shows that don't want my drawings, and
Okay.
I understand that. There's um, as far as them. First of all, I respect your sensible thought that you need to decide ahead of time whether it's practical to make the work you're making, but I never do that. So I
I
make the
admire
work.
that.
and then I figure out what to do with it. So these drawings are all hung with the gator board is put up on the wall with a template, and the template has the drawing on it. And then the drawing is slid up underneath the template. And then the nails are hammered through the template into the gator board, into the wall. So then the little parts that you're talking about that fall down on the edges,
Yeah.
small blocks of gator board with Velcro. So I'll just put a piece of Velcro behind, like you can see some of these parts here, they might need to get closer to the wall than they are. And then I just put a block behind them.
So you're kind of a mad scientist.
I suppose.
You just invent something when the problem comes up. You find a way.
Although my son-in-law, who is a scientist, would not like the analogy.
He's not an artist, though.
He's not mad.
He's one of the ones researching solar energy.
So here's another one. I think that also took care of the how are you exhibiting and moving these also, right, Jean?
This one, I've moved a few times now, and I have, those cement, what do you call those? They're cement molds, tall, get them at Home Depot. They're big molds. Tell me, you know what I'm talking about, round cylinders.
Yeah, yeah.
So I put that at one end and roll it. I put it in I put plastic sheeting on the floor, and then I lay it upside down on the plastic sheeting, fold the plastic sheeting over it, and then roll it up on the cylinder. And
Oh,
that's
really
easy.
cool. Yeah.
Yeah, that works well.
Did how are you preparing the paper before you start? I think you kind of went into that.
I don't prepare anything.
You don't prepare it. Okay.
No, and I sort of feel like I've been part of a critique group for maybe over 15 years now. And everybody knows, I mean, this same, there's some people that need white gloves to install their work so that there's no oil that comes onto the paper and it stays pristine and perfect. I kind of feel mostly like whatever happens to the work is supposed to happen. It's part of the life, it's part of its journey, just like it's part of mine. And so I don't get real upset. I mean, clearly, look at this down here. If this tore a little bit more, would it matter? It's not.
Right. And again, it's part of the metaphor you're talking about as far as life,
Yeah, so I really think
happen.
I like to go through life doing it the way my gut says makes sense. And I think I need to make art the same way. Actually, someone was in my studio. I'd known him. He was back in town. I'd known him when he was young. His wife had bought some work of mine. And they came up to my studio and he looked around and he said, "So you make all your decisions from your gut?" And I said, "Yes, but I married a doctor, so he covers me."
That's a good match.
Yeah.
Actually, the analytical and the non-analytical. Suzanne asked, did your ground continue to be the Arches paper when you morphed away from the rectangular process? I think you said it was silk. You turned to.
Yeah, I've tried different paper, but I love Arch. I've used different weights. I don't like it if it's too thick because then it's hard to sand through, but I don't like it if it's flimsy either because then it's ridiculous to try and move it. So I think this is pretty heavy and I buy it by the roll.
Do you tint the Gorilla Glue or does paint adhere to it?
Paint adheres to it.
Okay. And how concerned are you with your work being archival? We always have to have that question. Always have it.
I am concerned, but as I just said, I'm loose about what happens to it. It's very important to me that it lasts forever. I don't know why.
Do you put a sealant over anything?
Nothing. But and not only that, most of it, I mean, how am I going to get an 11-foot drawing framed at this point? So there's a lot of questions there that I can't answer for you because I'm totally impractical and unrealistic about making my work.
Well, thank you so much. I think that's the end of the questions. Unless someone has one that they didn't put in the chat, you can unmute yourself and speak up now or forever hold your peace.
Quite a breath of fresh air.
Yeah,
Thank
lovely.
you. I like the permission to do
So
it.
unique.
Yeah.
Thank
Thank
you
you so
very
much.
much. Thanks for taking the patience to listen to my
Yeah,
stories.
thank
It
you
was
so
fun
much.
sharing them.
It's been an adventure.
Yes.
So,
Yeah.
and it's, it kind of bringing a lot of your feelings to our own minds, and it's very wonderful. Thank you.
Thanks very much.
You can unshare yourself now,
Okie doke.
Judy. Thank you.
And as Sean just said, great stories. I mean,
Yes, I love the
your
stories.
childhood and all of the things that moved you toward this experience of process is fascinating, really.
Thanks for sharing. Let me share it with them with you. They're wonderful, some wonderful times.
And I love since I am very interested in environmental issues, the fact that you're dealing with that in an artistic way, as a way of educating is really important.
It was very difficult. A bunch of us had a show. It was called Tipping Point, I think. I remember I produced a video with a videographer and a dance choreographer I knew, and it was all about climate change. And then my nephew, he writes for Bloomberg Green, was telling me that, this is the way it's going. There's a lot of people doing it. Unfortunately, we can't, we can't change it. And this third, now I'm ending up telling you about these guys. This third nephew, he researches the economics of it, and all three of them pretty much think that it's policy that has to change it. So,
And is that going to happen? We could,
we don't
we
know.
don't want to go there today.
I don't think that's a good place to go, but
Yeah.
You should
Well,
read.
I think.
pardon?
Sorry, go.
I was just going to say that you should look at there's some accolades on the chats also.
Lots of great compliments.
Is there a way for me to see those? Would I just go to chat?
Just go to chat and it'll open up the window. Just click on chat.
Oh, this is wonderful.
Can we just maybe save them? I think.
Yeah,
So it'll
say-
show up. Yeah, and I can send them to you too.
Sure.
Judy.
Oh, that would be great. I love it. Thanks so much.
Yep.
It's
Yeah,
been a
somebody-
pleasure to talk with you all, and it's
Thank
nice
you. Thank
to
you.
really talk with somebody who has a loose perspective on making art. So
It was wonderful.
No, it was, well, I think you hit the right group.
Yeah, somebody who's
It was
studied.
wonderful and enlightening and makes us all think deeply about our own thoughts and works in our own life.
Yes.
yeah, well, I think that we need to do it and enjoy it and do it because it needs to come out of us and not for some
Yeah.
extraneous reason.
I
As
do
somebody-
agree.
Oh, never mind. Oh, as
Okay.
somebody who studied biology, I have a master's degree in species diversity, and it was all those wonderful organisms that came out of your imagination were totally amazing and mind-blowing, and I really loved them. One
Why
of my
didn't you speak
subjects
up
was
so we could hear what it's really about?
Oh, no, I mean, it just has to do with evolutionary biology, but it
Oh,
does,
that's
you don't
amazing.
experience it that way. But I loved seeing your vision. Thank you.
Thank you for telling me it had some validity to for what you were,
Well,
for
I
what
was
you know is happening.
That's great. Well, thank you again. And I'm one to, at this point, I think if there's any other comments for Judith or questions, I like to open it up just for a general discussion. And if any of you like to say something about yourselves or your work, we have time to hear about you.
I have to go, but
Oh. Thank
this-
you for coming.
this
Carol,
was
have a wonderful trip.
thank you. This was a great first time with you guys. I'm thrilled. I'm thrilled that I joined and this is available for me. Oh my God, you've got my brain going like crazy.
So Carol, think about coming on our board and being a helper.
Oh,
We need you.
We need you.
My
And
another plea.
anyway, but thank you for joining us today. It's a pleasure meeting you.
Yes.
Anybody else like to have to say something or chit chat? And because we have time and no.
Well, Lorraine has to go. I don't want to hold her up.
So,
Yeah, Lorraine has to go.
I just want to
Okay, Lorraine.
continue to talk. I can just leave it on.
Okay.
But
Well,
And
I
then we'll
don't
just
I don't
leave.
see anybody stepping
Okay.
up to say anything anyway. Hello, anybody? Okay.
Bye.
Carol.
we-
Bye, Carol.
Bye,
Have a
Carol.
good
Thank you
trip.
so much, Judith.
Thank you.
Thank you, Judy. It's been
Thank
All right, well,
delight.
with that, then we will conclude the meeting, and thank you all for attending. Thank you, Judith, once again, and Lorraine, thank you for handling the Zoom, and everyone for their opinions and suggestions and accolades to Judith.
Thank you.
Thank
Great
you.
job too,
Bye-bye.
Lorraine.
Bye-bye.
Okay, bye
Bye.
everyone. Bye, Shani.